Okay. The next item is the appropriation of funds for possible purchase of 525 San Antonio and also to the elementary school reserve. Dr. Skelly.
I'll turn this item over to Dr. Golton. This was, I think there's additional information the board asked for based on the presentation last time, and so Dr. Golton is going to go through it.
The board asked for further details on the budget, and so I'm presenting attachment 2. I guess there's a, well, for those of us that are doing this all the time, there's a magic number as it relates to elementary school budget, and that magic number in attachment 2 at the bottom of the page is $98,533,279. Of that amount, certain monies have been expended already, and again, I'm on attachment 2. $21,000 was expended a couple of summers ago on the Addison Elementary School library. As it relates to Hoover Elementary School, there was planning money that was expended related to the Hoover Elementary site. And then, as you know, there's regarding elementary school classroom improvements, there was that money spent on smart boards and also sound assist systems. And so of that particular $44 million, $42,173,805 is still available, and so those are the monies that have been allocated in relatively small amounts, and the elementary classroom improvements a relatively small amount to each school. We then have the big blocks of money that of that $22.178 million for Garland Elementary School, we've already spent approximately $281,000, leaving a balance for Garland of $21.9 million. In addition, we have $11 million allocated to Duvenick, and we're spending design money now. We have $9.3 million for Fair Meadow, of which we've spent significant money on design. And then, as I mentioned last time, we have spent significant money on Ohlone. That project is almost done. Again, I want to point out, I want to disclose that if all goes well with Ohlone, we will have $1 million to sweep back in the program. The bids were very favorable, and that, by the way, includes the possibility that we'll spend the entire change order allowance, because that change order allowance has been encumbered. So if all goes well, we'll have $1 million to sweep back into the program, which would be a nice thing. So at any rate, the fact remains, this is the status of the budget, and then if you look at enclosure 1, what we're proposing doing is sweeping the available money into and moving it to two line items. One, a line item, $8.5 million for the purchase of 525 San Antonio Road, and the second line item is to generate $33.6 million to be used to as it relates to the need for additional capacity at the elementary schools, and then other projects as designated by the board. But for now, it'll be put in the reserve. And so that is our recommendation.
Okay. Ms. Klausner.
I don't have any questions. I just want to thank Dr. Golton for providing that second attachment too in response to board questions.
Ms. Mitchell? Mr. Tom? Ms. Townsend? No. I don't have any questions either. I also want to thank Dr. Golton for that chart. It helps me to see it laid out that way. I know the others as well. So we're we ready to make a move here? Sure. Do you want to go ahead?
I'll move approval of the reallocation of the Strong Schools bond funds as shown in attachment 1.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Okay, our next item is the approval of resolution number 2011-1207, evaluating real property in accordance with school site selection standards and approving the acquisition of real property, 525 San Antonio Road. Dr. Skelly.
So this is it, folks. This is when we put in motion. The other two are preliminary. Now it's time to do the final thing. I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Golden, but before I do, I'd like to, I know the board will say this as well, but to thank Harold Friedman for his help from Lozano Smith throughout this process. We've done this on a quick timeline, and at every point, Mr. Friedman has been very helpful to us, and we certainly appreciate his work. And I'd also like to thank Dr. Golden, who has, seen a bulge in his work the past few months as he's been dealing with this on a fairly continual basis. So I know I speak for the board when I say how grateful I am for both these people and how appreciative I am that they're on our team. Dr. Golden.
Well, basically, this is a resolution. We're asking the board to adopt a resolution. The resolution has exhibits, and the first exhibit describes the property, and the second, and there is also a second exhibit where we say that we'll sell this property pursuant to terms, conditions, and covenants. But then we have a third exhibit, which is this set of this very substantial number of findings, namely 32 findings. These are ordinarily done over a period of months, but there was an issue of wanting to close by November the 1st. It was part of the arrangement, and so we moved forward with these particular findings. I have passed out to the board a revision that changes the language in a couple of these findings. We have a 1 week period to do due diligence that will end on October the 18th, 1 week from now, and we have some issues. A couple of these findings, the work still needs to be completed, and so what I want to do is first. You have the findings in your board packet, and what I wanted to do was to ask Harold to run through the two findings that are still at issue.
Thank you. If I can call your attention to the first one is finding number 7. The findings all track regulatory language of what it is that you're supposed to be looking at. And in this particular finding, you're looking at above ground water or fuel tanks, or fuel storage tanks, and also underground pipelines that can cause a risk. And your consultants are able to determine the only above ground tank that was within the radius of any note. There's a Jiffy Lube not too far away that has an above ground storage facility for used oil and for used oil filters that's been determined not to be a threat. So generally this finding can be made, it's supported, but the one other piece that was found is that there is an underground gas pipeline, natural gas transmission pipeline, within the 1,500 foot radius. It's actually within about 500 feet that's been identified. Pursuant to the regulations that are applicable, if you have such a pipeline, the key is whether or not it's over a certain pressure, over 80 psi. If it's over 80 psi, you have to have a risk assessment conducted, which has not been done yet. If it's under 80 psi, you don't. It's not determined to be a risk. There was hope that PG&E would have a confirmation of the size, and staff has done a good job trying to track that down, and it looks like that information will be available as soon as tomorrow. So if it's under 80 psi, the finding could certainly be made that there is no risk from this pipeline. If it's over 80 psi, the finding was basically modified to state that you will do the risk assessment before any development of any school facilities on the site. And again, you have the week feasibility period coming up so that we can hopefully bring in closure to that issue. So that's the first of the two findings that's changed since what was originally in your board packet. The other is finding number 24. And again, this one is most of the components of it are completed. Finding 24 has to do with a requirement that you make certain determinations that there aren't sources of air pollution within particular sources of air pollution or hazards within a quarter-mile radius. And your consultants have confirmed that there are no such sources within the quarter mile, but the regulation also calls for consultation with your local air quality management district. So a call is being put into your local air quality management district for that consultation. That's actually not happened. The likelihood of finding anything within that quarter mile that hasn't already been determined by your consultants is very small, but you do have to go through that extra step of consulting. So the finding, just to be accurate, was restated to rather than say that you have consulted, that you will consult, and the expectation is that consultation will be done within this next week feasibility period as well, and in fact may be done as soon as the next day or two. So that finding was just slightly altered to make clear that that's still going to happen. And those are the only changes from what you had in your board packet previously.
Thank you. Well, board members, why don't we start with Ms. Mitchell?
Thank you. As noted, there have been a tremendous number of due diligence efforts and findings, and I would appreciate it if you could express the recommendation you have regarding this feasibility period and the fact that there are these two open issues remaining, and how the board will follow up in the event that there are still open issues within the next week that aren't resolved.
Certainly, our recommendation would be that, at least as a placeholder, the board be prepared to come back before the close of the feasibility period, which is 5 p.m. on Tuesday the 18th, so that if these issues remain unresolved, the board could then address them. At that point, the board will really have choices. It can decide to move forward if it assumes certain risks, and by then, the risk will have been minimized as much as possible, or it could elect to not move forward with the purchase. Under the terms of the purchase agreement, in that feasibility period, you have until that 5 o'clock deadline to essentially withdraw from the purchase at that point. So our recommendation would be to have at least that placeholder meeting if needed.
And what that means is, should the board take action to approve the resolution and the purchase of 525, we will still have that period in which to reverse action should these findings be unattractive.
Correct. And I always analogize this to buying a house. If you've ever bought a home, you have the opportunity to enter into the contract, but then there's a feasibility period. You get to do your inspections. This is really the end of that time period through next Tuesday.
Good. And just for public notification, do we have a time that we could announce publicly for that meeting?
Yeah, I think it's 9 o'clock on
8:30.
8:30, excuse me,
8:30 next Tuesday
next Tuesday.
on the district office.
And it would be posted, we'll certainly know enough by Friday, do you think, Ms. Freeman, to know whether we'll schedule it or not?
I believe so.
Okay, so Ms. Baranoff will work on that, but if we do need to post it, why, we will, and if not, that would be great.
Thank you. That's all of my questions.
Mr. Tell?
Just to thank staff and Mr. Freeman on all the very, very hard work on a very, very complicated multi-step process that makes this very exciting step tonight possible. Thank you.
Ms. Townsend?
Dr. Golden, I have not received any communications from the community since the time of our last meeting on any of the findings in here. Just on due diligence, is there, I know in the last matter, you indicated the state, as a matter of routine, raised issues. Have you heard from the community in any fashion, concerns, or actually even excitement, one or the other?
Well, but we have heard from time to time people that really encouraged us to buy the property and so on. Not in the last couple of weeks. I think that this has moved along. It's moved past that.
And I had a question for Mr. Freeman. What was it? And I can't think of it. Other than, oh yes, there has been so much done in a very short amount of time, and it just does feel like whoosh. Why so short a time period?
Certainly, this is really a term that was imposed by the seller as a condition of a friendly sale. In other words, if you were going to engage in the sale on the price terms that had been discussed, this was the time frame that they had set as their outside. And I think it's known that they are purchasing the property themselves. They had been in contract to purchase from the current owner of the site. And so this is, I think, to dovetail with the timing of their contract as well.
Thank you. That's what I needed to know.
I'd like to give the student board members the opportunity to ask questions. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, before I have you ask, I will go to Ms. Klausner. That's what happens when you have 3 items.
I'm also good if the students want to go first. That's fine with me. But
No, go ahead.
We'll finish
Go ahead.
it off.
Yeah.
Okay. Just want to clarify. So in terms of kind of the risks we're taking on by the act, because we're going to vote to take action tonight to essentially move forward with this purchase. But then we have this 1 week kind of feasibility period, you called it, where we can, if we discover that some of the findings are not to our liking, as Ms. Mitchell said, we can basically back out of the agreement that we are taking action on tonight. Is that correct?
Well, the answer is yes, although we will not be doing, we don't anticipate doing any work other than on findings. The only variables we have are findings 7 and 24. All of the others, we do not foresee doing any work. We've made the findings. We're comfortable with the findings. It's simply findings 7 and 24 that we need to work on and make a determination. That is, we are either able to make a satisfactory determination or not, and if not, then we want to return to the board and get their decision on whether or not we move forward.
Great. And then in terms of the financial risk, if any that we're taking at this point in time, if we discover, which hopefully we all hope will not occur, that there is a finding that we are not satisfied with, are we risking any kind of deposit or anything of that nature between now and next Tuesday?
We have a deposit to make. First, the deposit's fully refundable, but second, the deposit isn't due to be made till next Tuesday. So.
Thank you. I'm going to let the student board members ask any questions they might have before I ask my last questions.
Well, I don't really have any specific questions, but I think it is. I think it's pretty cool that we're getting more property for a new school, especially with the growing district and that kind of thing. And it is a lot of money for just the land, but I guess it's probably worth it.
Yeah, I have to agree with Alex here. I do think that it's a good investment for the future, especially for an expanding community. I think it'll even help to you can say alleviate some problems at the current situation with, you can say, traffic and all that, because with another school we'll have smaller class sizes, and by doing so it'll be easier for students to communicate with the teacher and all that. So I think it's a good investment for Palo Alto.
Okay, thank you. Can't be sure it will necessarily impact class size, but it would certainly impact the pressure on the schools that we have. I want to just clarify something for some folks that might not understand or might not have been following this. Our community passed a bond measure a couple of years ago that gave us the ability to have money to build. This is capital money. We can only use it for capital. So we can only use it for buildings and technology. We can't use it for day-to-day spending. So I know that for some folks, you see the amounts of money we're talking about right now after Dr. Skelly had made some commentary on the state of our finances, and it might not make sense to you. But that is the reason why. What he's talking about is our operating expenses. Our operating budget being cut back substantially as a result of what's been going on in the economy in the state. That is completely different than the money we've raised through a bond measure because of the support of our community. And that money is going to long-term building projects, to land, and to technology, because that's capital. So anyway, let me back away from that for a second. And I do have one question. I just want to make sure that we we talk about all the risks that we possibly see here in the findings. And I think there was something around title. Could you share that with us?
One of the last pieces really with any property purchase during the feasibility period is that the district will obtain a policy of title insurance to protect you in case there's any later dispute as to the chain of ownership or possession of the property. We'll have an opportunity in this last week to get a pro forma title insurance policy to have an opportunity to state which exceptions to the policy may apply and what's acceptable and what's not. One of the things that will have to be worked out in that same week time period on the chain of title addresses the passage of the title from the current owner, which is A&D Protocol, to Summerhill and then on to the district. So there's technical cleanup issues that have to be done around that. We've been working with the title company. We expect it will likely be worked out. Tomorrow there is a deadline per the contract to notify Summerhill of any exceptions to which the district takes exception, if that's the right way to say it. And a notice will be going out indicating that there are some title issues still to be resolved. That's not unusual for a purchase of property. It's another issue that if it couldn't be resolved by the end of the week, that we could come back to the board on that Tuesday date that was set to discuss. Because in the end, you want a title insurance policy that protects you against any claims that may come in from anybody else who has an interest in the property. As of today, we're not aware that there's anybody like that, but we have to close that door.
Thank you. Board members, do you have additional questions? Yeah, Ms. Townsend.
In following up Ms. Baton-Caswell's question, what kind of title insurance do we have in terms of how good is it?
With staff's assistance, the district is actually having a survey performed on the site, which will allow you to get what's called an Alta policy instead of a CLTA policy. Without getting into the alphabet soup, it's basically a more extensive policy because it literally defines the boundaries of the site and verifies that exactly to the inch of what you are buying is protected. A CLTA policy is based on the representations of the seller. You'll actually have your own survey. It's also an extended policy, which means basically you're getting the maximum amount of coverage possible for this kind of purchase. So it costs a little bit more. It actually doesn't cost significantly more. The survey itself you have to have conducted, and there's an expense there. But it does give you a much higher level of protection. One of the reasons for that, aside from the fact we always recommend the Alta policy, there was an adjoining piece of property that was condemned by the city decades ago. And we want to make sure that we have a survey that clearly defines where the city-owned property ends and where the district-owned property starts. Right now, what you have is a line that somebody drew on a map. When your surveys are done, it will be a very precise line, and then that will be rolled into that policy.
Is it where the fence is?
We don't know. The survey will determine if it's exactly where the fence is.
Colleagues, do we have other questions? Comments? I guess I just had a question come up to me as you were talking. I wasn't aware that there was condemned property owned by the city. Is that, did I hear that correctly?
There was. In the title search, you always find out about the whole history of what happened with the property. At some point, part of this property was actually condemned by the city for what we understand to be part of the right-of-ways related to the street and sidewalk. And so that's a very typical thing to find. When they used to condemn property that way, and again, we're talking about decades ago, it would often be somebody taking a marker on a map as opposed to doing a very exact survey. So the survey the district is doing now is really to provide you the protection to make sure that what you believe you're buying lines up exactly with what you're actually getting title for.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Townsend.
And I really appreciate that. Given our history, we had a little, when you say decades ago, it makes me kind of catch my breath because I think, well, I've been alive decades. It's not that long ago. But anyway, we had some city school property around Hayes that we had to get sorted out. So I really appreciate this extra step because it has come back, and we've had, I know Dr. Galton had to deal with it before, so this is being very careful, and that's good.
Okay, so this is an action item. Are there other comments that anyone wants to make, or are we ready to take a motion?
How about a motion? I move that the board approve the resolution number 2011-12.07, evaluating real property in accordance with school site selection standards and approving the acquisition of real property for the 525 San Antonio Road property.
Second.
All in favor? That motion passes 5-0. Okay. Well, if we have a need to meet, we will be meeting on Tuesday, the 18th at 8:30, but a.m. But we will announce whether we need to do that at the end of the week. Okay, well, this is a big deal, actually. It's been a long, long time since PAUSD has moved forward on acquiring any property, so this is big news.